Can anyone hear me in the chat? Supertriz says that Supertriz gives us a 1, and I see you guys saying yes. Is there any echo? What's the quality like on a 1 to 10 scale? Is it 1 bad, 10 good? Oh, the volume seems very low. What about now? Oh, okay. Let me see if the what about now? Okay, cool, cool. No feedback, no echo, no nothing. All right. I think we're good. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 370, Geopolitics. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community tab. If you want to get in on the discussion, there will be a link in the chat for you to click. Once you click on the link, you'll be in the waiting room. Make sure you raise your hand so that one of us can acknowledge you to advance you to the panel. The docket will be in the description beneath the video at the end of the video for you to follow along with. Let me get started because I'm very late trying to get this together. And we are 7 minutes in. So for those of you listening, skip by 10 minutes to get to the articles that we're going to read. All right, let me start with the first item on the docket. All right, first item on the docket is from Newsweek. Trump's foreign policy is the greatest thing that's ever happened to Putin and Russia, intelligence expert says. A former U.S. Navy intelligence and counterterrorism specialist has warned that President Donald Trump's foreign policy is perfectly aligned with Russia's, and that his election has served as a huge boon for Russian President Vladimir Putin. In an interview published by Raw Story on Tuesday, Malcolm Nance said that Trump's belligerent and erratic diplomacy is undermining America's traditional alliances and opening up cracks that Putin will be more than happy to exploit. Last week, French President Emmanuel Macron warned that NATO nations could no longer necessarily rely on American assistance in the event of a conflict. Trump has maligned America's transatlantic allies for not spending enough on defense, and even questioned NATO's Article 5, the alliance founding principle committing all signatories to collective defense. Russia has long considered NATO an existential threat. Reading the alliance's continued expansion as an aggressive strategy of containment against Moscow. Discord within the bloc represents a win for Putin. Nance said that such NATO friction is the first step of what Putin has always wanted, i.e., increased Russian influence and on the world stage. To these guys, it's the greatest thing that's ever happened here. I think our allies think that information warfare and propaganda and Fox News has so tainted the country that the common sense of the United States can no longer be relied on, he added. Nance suggested that Trump's obsession with wealth and prominence has made him easy to manipulate and infuse with Putin's old worldview. He sees the world through Moscow's glasses, Nance argued. If Donald Trump sees the world through rose-colored glasses, they are glasses that were created, tinted, framed, and put on his face by Moscow. The cordial relationship between Trump and Putin has concerned Americans from across the political spectrum. Trump's gushing performances at joint press conferences with Putin at the bilateral summit in Helsinki and G20 in Osaka were particularly revealing. I don't know when this was written, but it was written November 13th. It's interesting that Malcolm Nance is now saying he's always been saying all these things, but Malcolm Nance has always been an agent of the CIA. I mean, that's initially who he has been and what he has stood for. And although I respect his opinion, I also respectfully disagree, because if Putin wanted to get his way with NATO, he would cut off energy to Europe in the wintertime and let the Europeans freeze and let them negotiate their way out. And a negotiation would be to take your NATO military off my borders, and we can have a real discussion about providing energy at a cheap cost. But that doesn't seem to be the case. The first person on the panel is Man of Tomorrow.
What's going on, man?
I'm sure, fam. What's going on?
Dude, it's so bad that the CIA had to pull their top spy from Russia a couple months ago. Like, people don't understand. Everybody views the Fox News as a threat to their national security. Dude, other countries would never allow money-infused ignorance to control a country. I mean, you have to understand this. We can't even get people to even pay attention to the impeachment trial because that's how bad it is. Dude, I'm telling you, there's a lot of stuff that's gonna come out once this dude gets out of office, and I'm sorry, man. Like, dude, you have to stop this stuff from happening. I mean, because that's why YouTube is kind of doing their kind of FCC thing with removing people who have these messed up kind of points of view, but they have so big a following that's kind of happening on their stuff. Like, this is what this is about, stopping that type of influence. Because think about it. How could the United States have clearly aligned themselves with a foreign power after the guy's been investigated? Now, he wasn't let off the hook, right? It's bad. It is very bad, Mike. It's very bad.
The thing is, it's an opportune time for Trump to come in to office, right? I'm not saying he's the best candidate, but he is the candidate that the collective wanted in the first place. They need Trump represents the last bastion of white masculinity in at least in the Western Hemisphere. He's the only one with the kahunas big enough to say the things that he says and do the things that he does. How that plays into Russia's role, Russia's resurgence was inevitable.
Oh, sure.
When Putin came back into power in 2011 after what happened in Libya, and what happened in 2008 in Georgia. You know, a lot of ADOS people, a lot of FBA's, Foundational Black Americans, thought that Atlanta was going to go to war and that the Russians were coming. And it was out there twerking in the streets. That was not the case.
Whoa, whoa. FBA? What's that?
It's the new hashtag, Foundational Black Americans.
Oh no, not another ADOS.
Oh, well, it's something. We also have DE Raptor on the panel. What's going on, brother? Shalom.
Hello, everybody. How you guys doing?
Great, brother.
Well, look, what we are seeing in this relationship between the U.S. and Russia is like, it didn't start with Trump, but the hand that he has to play it, and you know he's doing it the best that he can because a lot of his advisors are not actually pro-American, I would say. They are pro-money. And it's like they get into office, they get into office under him, and it's about making money while he's in there and after his administration is gone. That's what this is all about. A lot of them are like I said, they're not pro-American.
Yeah. Let me get to this next article. This one is from AlJazeera.com. Greece and China hail strategic partnership as EU and US and EU look on. Greece is attempted to be China's gateway to Europe, with Athens offering Beijing plenty of investment opportunities. Let me expand this out. Greek leaders on Monday hailed Chinese President Xi Jinping's first official visit to Greece as a new era in what is an already close trade and investment relationship being closely watched by the United States and the European Union. Greece recognizes China not only as a great power, but also as a country that has won for itself, not without difficulty, a leading geostrategic, economic, and political role. Prime Minister Mitsotakis told Xi. Greece is eager to play a greater role in China's overseas development. During the visit, the two countries' delegations signed 16 memorandums of cooperation, the most important of which outline new Chinese energy investments in Greece. One establishes an Athens branch of the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China to finance renewable energy projects. Another facilitates a 50-megawatt solar power station on the island of Crete being built with technical expertise from the China Energy Engineering Group. In an additional, in an editorial published before his arrival, Xi laid out his vision for increased cooperation in all areas. China and Greece must together promote the building of a new type of international relationship based on respect, justice, and mutually beneficial cooperation, he wrote. Greece-China relations took off this year when the 4-month-old conservative New Democracy government approved 611.8 million euros in Chinese investment that had been frozen for 18 months under the left-wing Syriza government. Over the coming 5 years, the investment, referred to as the master plan, will bring to almost $3 billion, the amount the state owed China Ocean Shipping Company, COSCO, will have to spend on the port of Piraeus. China's signature investment in Greece, and one which Xi refers to the head of the dragon. Interesting. COSCO has been developing Piraeus as an entry and transshipment point for Chinese manufactured goods for a decade. A strategic advantage to container shipping over the port of Northern Europe is that it saves a week's sailing and almost $2 million per trip. That makes it a crucial link in China's Belt and Road Initiative, a series of hundreds of infrastructure projects aiming to lower the cost of Chinese exports to Europe and Africa. Thanks to COSCO's investments, container throughput at Peru rose from 685,000 in 2010 to 5 million containers last year. Damn. Peru will this year become the Mediterranean's biggest container port, and by some estimates handles 10% of Chinese commodities exported to Europe, but that no longer seems enough. Mitsotakis and Costco chairman Zhu Lirong outlined a bigger vision in Shanghai on November 4th. We intended to make Peru the biggest port in Europe, and the master plan ensures that we will succeed, says Zhu. We want to make Peru a global transshipment center on the Singapore model. This openly pits Peru against the likes of Hamburg and Rotterdam, and would likely cost billions in additional rail and port infrastructure. Any port is as good as its connections to the hinterland. Thanks to the excellent hinterland connections by river, road, rail, and pipelines, Port of Rotterdam and Europe's biggest port, both in total throughput as well as container landing. Port of Rotterdam spokesman Leon Williams told Al Jazeera in a written statement. In the coming months, we expect the container throughput to pass the 15 million a year milestone. It is not for Port of Rotterdam to determine whether other ports can copy this achievement, nor how they envisage to surpass this, he said. This is interesting because for those of you who don't really know, what did anybody? Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Mike.
Oh, okay. For those you don't know, Greece sold off a lot of its military grade equipment to China. They're landing. What do you call those naval vessels? The hovercrafts. Those hovercrafts. I can't remember the name of them off the top of my head right now. They're landing crafts, but I forget the actual name to them. Basically, they sold them to the Chinese, and the Chinese repurposed them and retooled them, and now they have a PLA Navy that has the ability to land inside Taiwan if they needed to.
Yeah, Greece went into the EU thinking that it's going to be a great benefit for them. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Italy and all the other smaller nations, that weren't connected long ago through, how would I put it now? Because this thing started with Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth, when she married off everybody's daughter, connecting up the Habsburgs and the Germans and the British and the French and Spanish and Portuguese, through royal marriages. Mm-hmm. And there were, even though Elizabeth married a Greek, Greece was still the stepchild. Mm-hmm. And when the EU, when it joined the EU, you got places like Germany that came in and stripped out all the manufacturing. England came out, stripped out all the banking, and so Italy has to find a way how to get his people back into employment. And the Chinese offered them a good deal, so they took it. And that port, when it expands, it's going to drive a lot more than just the port. And like Rotterdam now, they have to be looking at this and saying, we got to do something. All the big ports in Northern Europe, have to be looking at that and say, we have to do something. So not only is Greece did it, but Italy did it. And France is trying its best to get in on the action.
Well, the thing is, Greece is a part of the PIGS. Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain. That's the PIGS, for those you don't know. These countries are in dire economic downward spiral. Basically, they're hurting, and they're opportunists at this point. Any sort of investment into those countries is a win for them. And if they had it their way, they would leave the European Union and get the hell out of there because it serves as no real benefit to them overall. The euro is a central currency within the union itself, so therefore they cannot compete their labor in Greece against the labor in Germany and France.
Yeah. Germany, France, Britain, Holland. I mean, they can't compete against these places at all. So they like you said, they have to accept that deal. It's not the best deal, but sometimes you got to take that and then you got to use it for what you to kind of like a foundation for what you want to do in the future. And that's why you see EU, they make it so difficult they made it so difficult for Britain to leave because all the other people are going to be checking out. If they made it easy for Britain to get out, then you got, like you said, the pigs will be looking for other way, avenues out. And Germany's investment in them become less important. And that's what China's trying to do. Is not doing it directly, but is doing it in a roundabout way.
Yeah, definitely. I foresee that once Britain leaves and everyone else in the union gets to see how nasty it is to exit the European Union, they'll be figuring out their own strategies too. This is a wait and see game for the pigs, right? Portugal.
You're losing you, Mike. You're losing you in your volume.
You know?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah.
Okay. I was just saying that this is the rest of the pigs are watching Britain in the Brexit to see how this works out for Britain. If Britain, one of the strongest powers within the EU, strongest members within the EU, has a difficult time leaving, they have to understand, if I'm Greece, if I'm Italy, if I'm Portugal, if I'm Spain, how do I get out?
They can't because they can't pay the fine.
Right. So they would have to get out militarily or something to that effect, in my opinion. Because if you can't afford to pay restitution back to France, similar to how Haiti had to pay restitution back to France, for I don't know how many years DE?
They're still paying, brother.
I thought they paid it off in like 1913 or something like that.
Well, they're supposed to pay it off, but you really can't pay off that thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's you can't pay it off. It's the leaders of the country. They have a hand on the leader's head. So everything that they have to get is either through America now, but used to have to be going through France.
Yeah, Greece is nothing more than a tourist destination at this point. Nothing really positive comes out of Greece from a manufacturing standpoint. So they become now a logistics hub behind the idea of a tourist destination.
Yeah, but all the pigs are the same. You got that right. All of the pigs are a tourist destination. They encourage people to come when you retire in Europe, or if you got some money in Europe, come build a house in Spain. Come build a house in Portugal. You got the coast. We got the coast. We got great vacation. You come down here every year, spend your money. And that's what it is.
Yeah, I foresee that. Well, the difference between Italy and Greece is that Italy produces vehicles, right? They have transportation. They have a very vast transportation sector that they built up. So they have some manufacturing available to them.
Yeah, but they don't own it anymore. Between Germany and Britain.
Did we lose DE?
I forgot the other country, but they hardly own anything. I mean, they have to give it all up to get the loan from the EU. And Greece's case, and then in Italy it was bought out. Most of it was bought out.
Good to know. Let me get to the next article from nationalinterest.org. China could solve the South China Sea challenge by sinking U.S. Navy aircraft carriers. Key point, sinking U.S. aircraft carriers could be an act of war, not a warning shot across the bows. Not a spy plane down for crossing into Chinese territory, not an accidental collision between an American patrol plane and a Chinese fighter. LeMay, the U.S. Air Force general who torched Japanese cities and later headed Strategic Air Command, was notorious for his bellicosity in the 1950s, and during the Cuban Missile Crisis, he tried to get the U.S. to launch a nuclear strike against the Soviet Union during the Vietnam War. He urged bombing North Vietnam back to the Stone Age. Interesting. That's what they did to the North Koreans. Now comes Lu Wan, deputy chief of the Chinese Academy of Military Sciences and proliferary hawkish military commentator who supports a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Last month, Yuan told an audience at a Chinese military industrial conference that China could solve tensions over the Southeast China Sea by sinking 2 U.S. aircraft carriers. This would kill 10,000 American sailors. What the United States fears the most is taking casualties, said Lu. We'll see how frightened America is. Lu has previously urged an invasion of Taiwan if the U.S. Navy uses the island, regarded by China as a renegade territory, as a naval base. If the U.S. naval fleet dares to stop in Taiwan, it is time for the People's Liberation Army to deploy troops to promote national unity of the island, he said. LeMay was no fan of communism, but he would have understood Lu's sentiment. Unfortunately, neither man seemed to know the difference between aggressiveness and foolhardiness. LeMay's first strike on the Soviet Union would have triggered World War III against a nuclear-armed superpower. Even if the U.S. had managed to destroy most Soviet nuclear weapons, it would only have taken a few bombs landing New York or Los Angeles to kill millions, not to mention a Soviet army that would have wreaked vengeance on Western Europe. Now comes Admiral Lu, who represents what seems to be a growing Chinese belief that America is too weak to fight. The Chinese are certainly not the first. The Germans and Japanese thought the same in 1941. Perhaps China should remember that the Japanese thought the Chinese were weaklings in the 1930s. Lu says China's anti-ship missiles are sufficient to destroy U.S. carriers and their escorts. Militarily, it may be true that hypersonic missiles or ballistic missiles converted into anti-ship weapons could do the job. Then again, they might not, because these weapons have not been tested in war, which brings up the real issue here. Sinking U.S. carriers could be an act of war, not a warning shot across the bows, not a spy plane down for crossing into Chinese territory, not an accidental collision between an American patrol plane and Chinese fighter. Sinking an American carrier would be, just a repeat. But if Lu is wrong, as he is almost certainly is, no U.S. president, no senator or congressman would remain in office if they did not respond forcefully in the sinking of U.S. carriers, the very symbol of American power and prestige. To the American psyche, such an act would be the equivalent to Pearl Harbor or 9/11. I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve. Japan's Admiral Yamamoto said after Pearl Harbor, Admiral Lu would do well to heed the advice. Really?
Well, I don't think the Chinese government actually. He's like a talking point, you know. I think they're allowing him to speak um, on the subject, but um, they are not treating America in the way that he's talking.
Mhm.
This guy is just trying to scare whoever's reading his article. But the Chinese government know they have seen what works, and what works is not attacking America directly militarily. They will attack America if, like in the case of Vietnam or Korea, but not a direct attack China against America. The Chinese government is not going to do that. At least this Chinese government, they know that. They've seen, like he said, Pearl Harbor, and anybody who attacks America directly, they see what happens. The Chinese government know what works, and they know the economic program that they've got is what is working best for them.
We also have the Golden 11 on the panel. The Golden 11, if you can hear us.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
I'm chilling, fam.
All good, Nagon?
What's going on, MC Squared, DE?
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I'm just rolling in here, man. I'm just kind of getting settling in, man. So,
all right. DE, do I sound low?
No longer.
Yeah, you do sound a little bit low because I was trying to check my sound to see if my sound was up because you do sound a little low.
All right. What about now?
You sound okay?
Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me?
I can.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't know. I don't think this can actually change anything. Anyways, if you can hear me, you can hear me. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think what's happening here with obviously he has to pump up the confidence of the Chinese military. But what I see happening here is that I don't think the U.S. has the guts to actually go into China anyways. They probably won't need to. But for sure that if they do think about crossing into Chinese airspace, that they will probably get a lot of their planes shot down almost immediately. So then the real question is, what would be not the legitimacy, but what would be the gain for U.S. to go into China? I mean, what would they be securing? I don't think the Russians would stand by idly. I don't think many of the Asian countries would stand by idly and watch their economic links go down in flames over Western hegemony.
Notoriously bad idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Terrible idea. You talk about World War III. Asia will be destabilized. I mean, it would just be a terrible move.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see the benefit in even trying something like that. Our best bet is to work out a trade deal with China, get back, doing some fairly decent business, and grow both economies the best we can, and forget about any serious military options right now. Even though you and I, we looked over the John Pilger film, we see what maybe some in our government might be thinking, but I do not see that as a very viable option at this point in time. I just don't see it. If there are others who have many other ideas, I'd like to hear it, but I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, you had this lunatic, according to the article, who used to work, who was a part of the U.S. military, who wanted to launch a nuclear strike on the Soviet Union at the height of the Vietnam War. I mean, you have to think about how psychopathic that is to even invite such a thing. I mean, if you think that the Russians are just twiddling their thumbs and drinking vodka, Stoico vodka, you're an idiot. You launch a strike against them, they'll, like the article says, they'll light up your east and western borders on your country.
Hey, sorry, Mike. That's why I had to fire MacArthur, and what's the name had to fire the other one that marched across Europe. You remember his name, the general? He was a pretty good.
We had MacArthur. We said he had to go because Truman said this guy was talking crazy.
Yep.
And dismissed him forthwith. Yep. And then MacArthur he finished off. Who else he may have had?
The guy that wanted to attack Russia after World War II.
You talking about Patton?
Patton. That's why I what's the name had to fire him.
Patton was like, "Hey, listen, we're getting the Balkans. We're getting ready to secure them." But he kind of was. He was kind of in line with some of the thinking of Churchill at the time too. Churchill was like secure the Balkans as well, and he was like, "Our army's ready to go. We're tight. Let's get them. Let's get them now. While we got the muscle, let's get them." And we thought that was an insane idea, and I do not believe we would have beaten the Russians on their front. I don't believe that would have happened. Oh, no. We would have had to have nuked them. That would have been crazy. So and that wouldn't have, that would just, at the time, just, the cooler, more intelligent heads prevailed. And that's the key. You got to have, the right people in place. You just can't have a real wacko out there, making these ill decisions. But we've had very sick people who were inside, one or two on the Joint Chiefs trying to make crazy decisions, and all of them have been beaten back so far in history. So
the thing is, Churchill never liked the surrendering to the U.S. anyways, to the Yanks.
Right. Yeah.
His opinion for World War II. So why not get the Americans to try to attack the Soviet Union, and then the Soviet Union would retaliate, and then in the end, we would all, we as the Brits would benefit as the two major powers collided, and once the smoke clears, we will come out as the victors.
Well, he came up pretty much with the whole Iron Curtain thing. Mm-hmm. But the whole Iron Curtain was going to drop, and that's really kind of that was the talk. Literally through the Cold War. So he did come up with that strategically in certain aspects. He was correct looking at some things that were going to happen in Eastern Europe and really in Eurasia. He actually saw some of these things kind of clearly, but we just didn't have the belly for the war after that, man. It was pretty much done, and we would have to fight a ferocious enemy. Yeah. If we were going to, fight because they had beaten back. People want to say that the winter, knocked down a lot of the German panzer forces. Yeah, they did, but still, the Germans, did put well over 1 million men on the arms to run up into, up into Stalingrad, and they faced them head on. Mm-hmm. They had to face the cold as well. So, it just wouldn't have been a good move for us. I don't think we would have done. I don't think we may have fared as well as we might have thought we would have fared against Russia then, and they had a very powerful army. They did. We had a powerful one, but theirs was very strong. I don't necessarily think we would have won that. Now there may be those who may have some differing views, but I think the cooler heads, Eisenhower and them, they took a different tact, and I think that was the right way to go for that time, because we would have easily have looked at losing another 25 to 30 million men. I think we would have lost underneath something like that. That's really where I think we would have been in troops. Don't forget, and God knows how many Russians would have died. I mean, that would have been, oh my God, no. Anyway, we gonna say, Mike?
Don't forget that the Russians had just lost 20 to 25 million of their own.
Yep.
War II. That was fresh in their memory.
That's right.
It's still in their memory, bro.
Still is.
I'm saying at the time.
And the Chinese still remember the last 100 years, 200 years. I mean, I was reading an article today about the Chinese thing. This guy says, I remember the Japanese invasion of China. And everybody in my generation they would continue to teach us every year to tell us about it. So we never forget.
And they call that the Great Patriotic War and all that. Yeah, man. Now that was and the rape of Nanking. I mean, you know, they got all this stuff still going on. I mean, big in their history. I mean, I just saw this was some few years back where a Japanese contingency was having a party. I think it was in China or something. You know, kind of celebrating the rape of Nanking. Bought a whole bunch of you know, Chinese women up in there, and you know, paid for them and all that. And I think those guys ended up getting arrested, and they ended up arresting them Japanese dudes just for doing that. Lord knows what happened to them when they put them in prison, but it was kind of like that. Yeah, the Japanese dudes were illin', so there's still a tremendous amount of bad blood between the Chinese, the Japanese, and man, the Koreans and Japanese folks. They just when they see each other, they want to knock each other out. It's not good. So yeah, those tensions are still high.
Yeah. There's a question in the chat from Jay Green. Said, would India help the U.S. versus China? I doubt they would.
Your volume is going down again, Mike. It's dropping off.
What do you mean dropping off? I haven't changed anything. What do you mean? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but I can hear the volume dropping off.
Okay. Anybody gonna answer this question?
What's the question?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you a lot better. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me make this adjustment.
Would India help the U.S. versus China? I don't think that will happen.
Well,
unless China was so severely beaten that India felt it could seize some of the Chinese landmass.
Well,
I don't think India will go in to help the U.S.
Yeah, I don't think that China. I don't think that India would need to take anyone's sides. I mean, they would have to worry about insurgencies, multiple insurgencies, not just outside the country, but within their own. Because they're pretty isolated, you know, through the Himalayas and all that stuff, man, that protects them from an actual invasion or a counter-strike, at least. So they don't have anything to gain by knocking China with the U.S. because then they have to wed themselves to the U.S. as well. And that's something that they don't want to do from a foreign policy perspective.
Well, India and China have had some relatively recent, you know, over the last 20, 30 years, they've had some relatively recent battles over some areas near Tibet and so forth that China has taken back from India through some armed conflicts. So they've had border skirmishes with India. They've had it.
Well, so they've had the same thing with the Russians too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is India would not gain anything by assisting the U.S. in taking down China. You remember, there's a lot of Chinese investment into India. If those Chinese investments pull out,
you know, that's true.
A deck of cards. that's like a 52 card pickup for them. So.
Yep.
I mean, I agree. I think things.
If they
I just think things are joined.
If they did that,
go ahead, man.
It will also hurt their interest more than it would benefit them,
right.
Because now they have a stronger voice on the world stage with China and Russia being in the mix.
Yep.
And the U.S. has to pay attention to all three of them. I mean, this whole BRICS thing, with India, even though India
It's all about economics there.
Yep.
It's
You're
all
right.
about economics. Like you hit it right in the head. It's all about economics. It's all about economics right now. That's what's really tying a lot of these guys together, man. So wars, this is about economics and trade. China is the second largest economy. So and their economy is going to continue to grow. I mean, their economic growth has been a lot bigger than ours. The last 10 years, where we've grown maybe 2.5 to 3%. They're growing 6-7% in a year. I mean, they've had an immense amount of growth. They're growing at twice the rate. So they're it's about dollars and cents right now. I think it's about business, and you hit it right in the head, the BRICS and everything else like that. Like you were saying there, DE, it's too strong right now. It's about the economics. If anything, maybe the United States would think about making an attack, but I don't see where we would benefit from that. I don't see any benefits there.
Well, it depends.
And if anyone thinks that there can be one, please, state where that benefit would be. I'd like to hear it.
Well, they would actually try to block off China's merchant ships shipping back and forth, and as well as the oil ships going back and forth. I mean, they did to the Japanese, so it's not uncommon that they would do something like that. However, in the event that they would do something like this, who would actually assist them in that event? I mean, the British and the French have been sailing their ships around the South China Sea as well to intimidate the Chinese, which I think is a very suicidal thing.
I think so.
For the Brits and the French, because the British and the French economies are heavily dependent upon China. If China collapses even for 24 hours, 72 hours, you will see a downward spiral for European economies as well.
I think the British and French are joining America because they know that right now the Chinese are going to say, hey, you guys better stop this. But they're not really going to take any really decisive military action or economic action against anybody. You understand? Because it doesn't benefit them. The Chinese know that it doesn't benefit them. Yeah. They just want to make their voice heard and say, hey, look, what you're doing is wrong, and we are not going to accept this. The Chinese are going to sail their military vessels right beside you, but they're not going to attack you. They're not going to cause you economic harm just because you are doing that.
Yeah. Let me get this next article because we're kind of long-winded on this. All right, this next one's from the Washington Post. Europe is quietly drifting towards a recession. It might be bad news for all. While almost everyone in Washington is glued to impeachment developments, Europe has been quietly drifting towards a recession. This is bad news for Christine Lagarde, the former head of the International Monetary Fund, who is now the president of the European Central Bank. It also bad news for the rest of us. By the usual indicators, which define a recession as 2 consecutive quarters of a shrinking economy, Europe is almost there. Growth of the Eurozone's 0.2% in the third quarter. Growth for Germany, Europe's largest economy, was only 0.1%. Employment growth for the Eurozone, the 19 countries using the euro, was only 0.1%. No one can want this. The economics are brutal, higher unemployment, lower confidence, and squeezed profits. The politics are worse. Greater distrust of government, more nationalism, and rising alienation. But what can be done, if anything? Note that the ECB's Europe's equivalent of the Federal Reserve, the tenure of Lagarde's predecessor, Mario Draghi, who ran the ECB from November 2011 until last month, is widely considered a success because his policy prevented the euro from being abandoned by weaker countries. Their exit from the Eurozone might have shattered the whole scheme. This was always a plausible threat if euro-dominated debts could not be repaid. the prices might also have been self-fulfilling. If depositors expect that, say, Spain might leave the euro. The fear might trigger a panicky outflow of money from Spanish banks. On July 26, 2012, Draghi effectively foreclosed these possibilities by declaring that the ECB would do whatever it takes to avoid the euro's collapse, adding that, believe me, it will be enough. In effect, Draghi pledged that the ECB would lend enough to banks and financial markets to ensure that they could meet their euro obligations. Later, the ECB reduced short-term interest rates and embraced its version of quantitative easing, QE. This was an approach adopted by the Fed under Chairman Ben Bernanke. It involves having the central bank, the ECB, or the Fed buy bonds to reduce long-term interest rates. The United States and Europe are in similar economic positions. In each, recovery is faltering. The basic problem on both sides of the Atlantic is that economies have become dependent on government-created stimulus policies, whether low interest rates supplied by central banks or huge budget deficits created by politicians, rather than being able to generate spontaneous internal growth. The trouble with this approach is that the government-supplied stimulus programs are losing their punch in both the United States and Europe. Low interest rates are proving less and less effective in expanding GDP and employment. Whatever the initial effect of low interest rates and the QE programs of bond buying, the law of diminishing returns seems to have set in. The benefits seem to be fading. This creates a dilemma for the ECB and Lagarde. In a short report, Jean Pisani-Ferry of the Peterson Institute for International Economics notes, growth in the euro area has slowed since the beginning of 2018, and the risk of a recession is growing. Yet the ECB, European Central Bank, has barely any space left for monetary stimulus. What are the alternatives? The most obvious are what economists call fiscal policies: government spending, taxes, deficits, and surpluses. Budget deficits are what matter here. There are two problems for the ECB. The first is somewhat technical. There are self-imposed limits on the ECB's bond purchases, about 33% of qualified securities. The ECB is approaching these limits, says Jacob Funk Kirkgaard of the Peterson Institute. If the rules aren't relaxed, the bond buying would presumably have to stop. Lagarde has provided some hints that she thinks some countries, Germany is the best example, could spend more and thereby stimulate growth. Central banks are not the only game in town, she said. Sounds simple. It isn't. The second problem is that the countries that could spend more don't want to, and the countries that want to are already overburdened with debt and shouldn't. Where does that leave us? Well, in every delicate position from which there is no obvious easy exit. Another recession in Europe would slow the already sluggish global economy and quite probably further fan the flames of nationalism and protectionism. Another Trump. As David Wessel in the Hutchins Center on Fiscal and Monetary Policy notes, Lagarde has a well-deserved reputation as a skillful negotiator and conciliator. Good, she will need all the help she can get. So, as we mentioned a few minutes ago before we read this article, that the French and the Germans and even the British helping the U.S. stifle the Chinese economy would actually boomerang and backfire on the Europeans as their economies further shrink. As this article is noting, they have had no growth in over 2 quarters.
Look, these guys, we need to deal with China as a trading partner and just get with the reality of what's going on. All this other stuff we're doing is just crazy because you just know that Europe at this stage of the game, as everyone pretty much sees, Europe, is caught between, in so many respects, what we're looking at: Iran, Russia, and China. That's how Europe is basically eaten. Okay, they're protected by us, but what are their economies tied to? I mean, we have to, you got to look at what's realistically going on. We seem to have Our hegemony. I understand hegemony. I understand the people want to talk about the a supremacy piece and all that, but clearly as we can see that's over, man. That's over. We're gonna have to bite the bullet and just get with kind of this true new world order that's going on right now, and become a responsible trading and business partner in this. The militaries are not going to solve hardly any of these problems now. They're not going to solve them. We can't lob bombs all over the place. Whoever gets hit, it's going to affect our partners, our big trading partners in Europe. They're at the whim of others. So they can talk a real tough game, but at the end of the day, they don't really have the wherewithal to really withstand anything crazy like this happening, or their economy's just getting shut down. What are we gonna do? Try to underwrite everything for them now, and just continue to build more and more literally welfare states around the world? That's not sustainable. So that's just my whole view on this. I look at a lot of this news and all. I'm like, man, it's about time for us just to get with the program. I just don't think that that the direction that we're trying to take is going to really do much to stop with what's coming. It's like holding back the dawn. You're not going to be able to hold it back. Let us work with this as opposed to really trying to fight it over time. I know there'll be those who will say, "Screw what this guy's talking about. No freaking way." But that's kind of how I'm seeing it. I don't, Mike. I don't know how you're seeing it. DE. I don't know how you're seeing it, but this is my general takeaway from this.
France knows that the writing is on the wall for them. They want Macron, who is a former banker and put in power by the bankers, knows that the writing is on the wall.
Right.
And so his desire to build an EU army is to build the EU into a French-run super state, and to carry out policies and take back economic control from Germany and put it into the hands of the French, and try to marginalize the Germans and British so that they can have their own foreign policy. That's why the EU army is so important to this, to protect the new guard to the state.
I mean, France has been getting hammered, been having problems ever since their whole problem with Algeria. I mean, nah, man. I mean, a super. I don't see it. I don't see anything that France could have that could be sustainable. We've been basically keeping their ass above water. That was a big part of this whole Libya piece and so forth. Nah, man. I don't see it. I think us really still trying to sit back and prop France up as long as we have, I think we need to start to move away from that as well. That's my take on it. I know there'll be those who won't agree. That's just my view, looking at the changes that are happening on the continent and what's starting to, anneal and re-anneal in the Middle East. I don't see it. But
well,
you're right. You're actually right, because if the U.S. keep kind of following France down that path of keeping Africa in check and keeping the Middle East in check and trying to hold on to their old colonial past.
That's right.
It's going to drain the U.S. It's going to continue to pull the U.S. down, not only pull the U.S. down, but accelerate it. Like you were saying, you can't, it's not sustainable. And the French don't seem to understand that.
They're so desperate to maintain their colonies in Africa that this is how much they're willing to go and how far they're willing to go.
I mean, when we look at all the some of our later our conflicts, let's say in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, and all that was over. The collapsing of the French Empire. And here here we were trying to prop it up, and it hasn't really worked. I mean, we've been running behind, fixing up their crap for a while, and it hasn't been that successful. Well, why are we still running behind that? Even the latest, as we said over there in Libya and so forth. I mean, it's just I just don't see it, man. I don't see it. It's been a failing policy literally for the last 50 years, and I think it's about time for us to take a different type of role and play our relationship game in the Middle East, in Asia, and so forth differently. Well, I think we're going to need to shift to a more realistic type of policy that's going to benefit us and benefit them. And I think that's the issue with we don't want stuff to benefit them. But I think that's going to be taken out of our hands after a period of time. And I think we were going to count on it militarily, and I just don't see how the military option is going to be that successful, because we're not successful with it right now. We can just look at Afghanistan and take a look at what's going on there with our military option, our perpetual war business. I don't know how long we're going to be able to keep that up without some serious blowback coming from that as well. I'm just not seeing our policies now as beneficial to us definitely in the relative short term. In the long term, forget about it.
Exactly, bro. And I just talk about the BRICS. What do you think brought the BRICS into being? Our belligerence on behalf of us and the Europeans. Yep.
I'm sorry, to break it down that way, but I just don't see it. I'm not seeing it, and all of this that's going on, it's none of it is going the way that I know a lot of us would like to see it. And I know we have the military industry is with the perpetual war business, is keeping an armaments industry going. But how sustainable is that, DE? How far is that going to
go? Look, we have to become a more. It's not possible when you're a strong nation. It's not possible to have a level playing field, because you're gonna have to give some and take some in order to maintain your position. That is what you is choosing, like Sun Tzu said, choosing the battles that you fight. You know what I'm saying? And that's we don't do that now. We want to fight everything.
I'm just looking at some of the G20. I know we had some interesting stuff come out of there. It just didn't seem like we were going to really kind of come out of there in a way that we were going to just dominate everything. There too many other nations who have growing economies that are moving. I just don't see how we're going to move a lot of this aside and play the game that we're still playing right now. I'm not seeing it. But Mike, do you see any changes there, or you think we can continue this as we're going? I don't.
It's not possible, bro. You said it yourself. You see it. You explain the reason why. And those are the same people that a lot of the economists nowadays are talking. Same things that a lot of economists are talking about. And now there's a lot of people in what we call the third world countries that used to hold these thoughts to themselves that are now speaking up.
Yeah.
Let me get to this next article from AlJazeera.com. India makes advance payment for Russian S-400 missile system. India has paid $800 million over a year after it signed a $5 billion deal to buy the missile system, Russian firm Rostec says. India has made an advance payment of $800 million for Russia's S-400 anti-aircraft missile system. The head of the Russian conglomerate Rostec, Sergei Chemtsov, said. Chemtsov told reporters on Monday that negotiations were underway and a contract with be completed in 2025. That's a long time. The development comes amid the threat of U.S. sanctions, but New Delhi has pinned its hopes on a waiver from Washington. India signed a $5 billion deal to buy the long-range surface-to-air missile system in October 2018 during a visit to New Delhi by Russian President Vladimir Putin. At the BRICS summit in Brazil on Thursday, Putin said the S-400 deliveries to India were going according to plan. This was very much on the cards. The United States has more or less signaled that it's okay with this project and it is not likely to invoke sanctions against India as a result of this. Ajay Shukla, an Indian analyst, told Al Jazeera. Moscow has long been the main supplier. Moscow has been the main supplier of military equipment to India, accounting for 62% of its total weapons imports during the last 5 years, according to the Stockholm Peace Research Institute. However, in recent years, New Delhi has inched closer to the US and Israel for weapons supplies. The US has warned that India could face sanctions if it goes ahead with the S-400 deal. It has issued similar threats to Turkey over a planned purchase of the missile defense system. Under a U.S. law known as Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, CAATSA, the purchase of defense equipment from Russia can be subject to sanctions. However, the president can opt to issue a waiver. Shukla, the Indian analyst, said that despite concerns, the move is unlikely to negatively affect Indian relations with the U.S., as it has Turkey's. India has been buying arms from Russia for decades. It only has recently switched over to buying arms from America. America is quite happy that it's selling a large number of arms to India, and it realizes that it cannot stop India from having a defense relationship with Russia because that is a historical pact, he said. The India-Russia relationship is very old and tested relationship. India's relations with the U.S. have also been hit by trade frictions, with New Delhi imposing higher import tariffs on some U.S. goods in retaliation for the U.S.'s refusal to exempt India from steel tariffs. I find it interesting that this CAATSA, this Countering America's adversarial, let me see, make sure I pronounced it right. Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, that they can unilaterally go after other countries based on their own laws. That seems really overreaching. I don't know how well this actually plays out, but this is something that I've seen before. Americans opening up bank accounts in other countries are subject to the Department of Justice under the Patriot Act.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. Wow. Wow, Mike, I don't know what to say to that.
Yeah, this is overreaching.
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that, man. That's way overreaching. From an international law perspective, is this legal? I mean, none of us here are lawyers who can sit down here and really answer that. But can you legally really do this?
I don't know if you remember. I think it was around 2010 ago. But
okay.
Brazil started asking guys who were down there to provide information for the IRS. If you had an account, if you had a bank account.
I myself never had to file anything to the IRS. I mean, I did pay American taxes here because I was not a resident of. I was not a naturalized resident of Brazil. So I have a CPF card. So there's a certain amount of taxes you pay towards government for purchases and other types of things. But as far as any income I made, I had to file a United States tax return. Even though I was making money over there, I did have to, but I was working under or auspices of an American company. Even though I was contracted out through the Bank of Brazil, I did have to file taxes here in the United States. That I did have to do. So I wasn't paying Brazilian taxes, and I was slick because I was kind of doing that while I was still on a tourist visa. So I was able to get over quite a bit. just by staying there 3 months, coming back to the States for a couple of days and dropping back down there, which kept me going, which kept everything going. So I didn't have a problem. But, I was able to dip around that a little bit. Now I don't know how that would handle that, but be a little bit different. But maybe so. I'm not saying that wasn't happening, but that didn't happen to me.
Yeah, that what part of the deal with HSBC and Deutsche Bank was that they turned over a lot of people's names to the U.S. government.
Yep. But see, I didn't deal with HSBC. I thought they were a slimy group of characters then. They was all over the place. It was them, Safra Bank. Well, Deutsche, I wasn't really doing much to them, but there was Wachovia at the time, which of course closed. I'm trying to think who else. And then, you had then you had your whole Chase game going on down there. But the big one was HSBC. And, I thought they were scumbags then, and they were everything I thought they were and worse. That's why I avoided them. To be quite frank with you, I didn't even like pulling money out from an HSBC bank to just for a withdrawal. I didn't even like doing that with them.
Let me knock out this next article. This one from CNBC.com. Russia's Putin says shale oil technologies are barbaric. Russian President Vladimir Putin has sharply criticized nations like the U.S. for ignoring the environmental impact on shale oil and gas production, describing it as a barbaric process that the Kremlin has no interest in pursuing. Speaking at a business conference in Moscow Wednesday, Putin said today's technology of shale oil production and shale gas are without any doubt barbaric. These technologies destroy the environment, he explained via a translation before adding that the areas affected by the extraction process were typically left in a precarious situation. In spite of all economic benefits, we do not need to, and we will never do this, Putin said. The U.S. Department of Energy was not immediately available for comment when contacted by CNBC on Wednesday. Output increases in the Permian basin of Texas as well as other major formations have helped the U.S. become the world's largest producer of oil. Earlier this week, the U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA, said in a monthly forecast the U.S. crude oil output from 7 shale formations was projected to rise to a record high of 9.13 million barrels per day in December. Advocates of fracking, the fossil fuel extraction process used in the U.S., say it vastly expands natural gas supply, a cleaner fuel than crude oil, and cuts costs for consumers. But critics of the process have sounded the alarm over its negative environmental impacts, including air, groundwater pollution, and increasing earthquake risk. Industry analysts argue the fracking industry is supported by a wide range of interests, not least the U.S. economy and national security. You can rest assured that Russia shall always be a responsible actor in the global energy market, Russia's Putin said on Wednesday. They have a very good point, or at least Putin has a very good point. And what fracking has done in a lot of these states, when they turn their faucet on, it's almost flammable. I mean, imagine you have to bathe with that type of stuff. It's very, very destructive. And people are feeling tremors under their feet as they, as they frack. Little tremors, like little mini earthquakes. So
yeah, it's polluting the groundwater across the whole middle U.S. Mm-hmm. I mean, like you said, people turn on their taps and either no water is coming out, or the chemicals that they put down into the ground is coming out through the tap. Mm-hmm. So, but the U.S. was forced into that position. if they didn't take over the oil, the leadership of the oil market, the U.S. economy would be being strangled right now by the Saudis and Russians.
Yeah, but you hit it right in the head as far as the fracking and all that. I've seen where they've actually had people open up their taps and literally light a match by it, and flame were coming out of the water faucets.
And you have to bathe with it.
You're paying for it.
No, I said you have to bathe.
Freaking fire coming out of your faucets, bro.
Yeah, but you know what? The USGS has come out and said that, you know what, this fracking is not what's causing the geological displacement in the Midwest. And everybody can see that as they started fracking, the earthquakes started increasing, and you getting volcanoes now that they're not talking about that are coming to life again.
Well,
especially California and Oregon. Yep. But we had to be in a position. If we were in that position today, the U.S. economy would have faltered a couple of years ago, because the Saudis would have raised the price of oil $80, $90 a barrel, especially if they're going to fight that war in Yemen.
All right, let me get to this next article. This one is from Reuters.
Scary, bro. Scary. Anyway, I'm sorry. Wait, go ahead, Mike.
All right, this one is from Reuters.com. Maduro says, "Thank God for dollarization in Venezuela." Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro embraced the currency of his bitter rival, the United States, on Sunday, calling it an escape valve that can help the country weather its economic crisis amid U.S. sanctions aimed at forcing him from power. The official currency, the bolivar, has depreciated more than 90% this year, while in hyperinflation in the first 9 months of the year clocked in at 4,680%, according to the central bank. The inflationary spiral has splashed the purchasing power of the South American country's minimum wage, which together with food assistance is equivalent to about $10 a month. I don't see it as a bad thing. This process they call de-dollarization, Maduro said in an interview broadcast on the television channel Televen. It can help recovery of the country, the spread of productive forces in the country and the economy. Thank God it exists, the socialist leader said. Maduro, who at least until 2018 forbid the use of the dollar, added that while he is still evaluating transactions in U.S. currencies, which have been growing in recent months, the bolivar will continue to circulate as the official currency. What the hell? Since 2003, the official exchange rate has been set by Venezuela's central bank, but the rate has become increasingly flexible. Venezuela will always have its currency. We will always have the bolivar and will recover it, and we will defend it. Maduro said in an interview with Jose Vicente, a leftist politician and vice president during the government of Hugo Chavez. Under an increasing severe U.S. sanctions, the central bank has started injecting euros into the economy. The government and state oil company Ferisa have even begun to pay contractors with the European currency. Foreign currencies enter the economy of the OPEC member largely from the sale of some shipments of crude oil and gold. Opposition leader Juan Guaido responded to Maduro's dollarization comments as a news conference later today, Sunday, saying Maduro had admitted another defeat. The failure in Miraflores, acknowledged today, is that the country is dollarized. He recognizes that our country cannot even hold value, Guaido said. Guaido, who heads the National Assembly, invoked articles on the Constitution in January to proclaim himself interim president, claiming Maduro's re-election was fraudulent. Maduro calls the opposition leader a U.S.-backed puppet. Recently, Caracas-based consultancy Eco Canalicia or Canalitisa estimated 53.8% of transactions in the first 15 days of October were carried out in dollars, according to a sampling of the country's 7 main cities. The number reached 86% in the oil-rich city of Maracaibo, which has been badly hit by power cuts. So, I mean, what else is he supposed to trade his goods in? Do you really think he's going to use what, Bitcoin? As long as the dollar is strong, they have every right to use it. Telling him that, well, he's a socialist government. Well, Germany is pretty socialist too. You don't seem to have a fucking problem with that though. And so is France.
Every country in Europe is social, and the U.S., even the U.S., man. I mean, there's so much social welfare here in the U.S. I mean, look at the farmers, look at the oil people, look at, I mean, even the people going into space now are being subsidized now by NASA.
Mhm.
So you mean, look, Microsoft is just jumping into the military market. All these are subsidies. This is socialism.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah,
just,
yeah, yeah.
you have to
No
go.
question about it.
They tell you go to work and you earn it your own money, so you're a capitalist, and you believe that the U.S. is a capitalist only country.
Right.
Every country uses capital. So, da-da.
Dave,
Well, the United States at its upper echelon, of the game, is purely socialist, and I would almost say almost communist in most respects. That's strictly for them. That's how I would look at it. They bring, the market forces, if you will, and all that down on the regular class, middle class, and so forth. But as far as the upper echelon, they've got more government contracts. They're eating more off the government, more government inside games, more abatements, more of everything that you can sit down and think about. It's pure socialism. I would say almost pure communism in certain respects. I mean, I'm not going to talk about it from the dialectical materialism approach, but certainly from, I would say, well, yeah, okay, from a dialectical material approach, yeah, okay, dialectical materialism, yeah, okay, I'll accept that as well for the upper echelon, because these guys have their own group going, they have their own crew, and whenever you can sit back and look at a bank that's too big to fail, or some of these institutions that are too big to fail, I mean, you have to sit down and think about what that really means, and who's really being covered underneath that. So, and who's underwriting that? It's us. So it's I don't know, man. So I totally agree with what D is talking about. Yeah, it's all about socialism at that level for them, and government contracts are definitely, and government government subsidies and so forth. That's how a lot of these people not only get rich but maintain their wealth.
Just look at one company now in the news. Just look at Boeing. Just look at Boeing, and then if you want to go on, look at GE. Ta-da!
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm gonna have to agree with that. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's a fact. I don't think we can deny it. Can't be denied. I dare anybody to try.
Yeah, let me get to this next article from Face to Face Africa. Why the misery of Libya and a no post-Gaddafi plan will forever haunt Barack Obama. At the end of August 2011, the BBC published the musings of a diplomatic editor, Mark Urban, on what future interventions in troubled countries would look like. At the time, the former Libyan leader, Muammar al-Gaddafi, had been ousted in a violent uprising inspired by the Arab Spring and Western interests. France, the US, and the UK have been more than helpful in striking at Gaddafi's loyalists. Urban's write-up was a fairly monotonic piece, but not Urban's write-up was a fairly monotonic piece, but not in a boring way. It read as you would expect the educated opinions of a person who knows wars and some peace. But the piece also betrayed the detachment respectable society which could still muster even in situations of gore on massive scale. Urban, saying nothing about his person, but as his work would require, was already looking forward to the next war, even when Libyan bodies had not gone 6 feet down. The man who embodies so much of this esteemed detachment with particular regards to Libya is Barack Obama. If there was a man who could afford to lead the offensive in Libya and look forward to another war like tomorrow is Tuesday, that was Obama. In April of 2016, Obama said failing to plan for the day after the ousting Gaddafi was the worst mistake of his presidency. However, he had no regrets about intervening in Libya because it was the right thing to do. Obama was pedantic in that interview, making sure he separated two things. He was a non-committal repenter seeking the absolution he would not say sorry for. That is the detachment he could afford. There was no sword of Damocles swinging around his head, threatening to come down when things go wrong. There is no denying that there was, to Gaddafi's overthrow, an organic and populist call. Indeed, Gaddafi's life had been in danger courtesy the venom of his own people since the 1980s. In 1998, he survived one of the many attacks on his life by Arab militia thanks to the storied bravado of one of his revolutionary nuns who was killed in the attack. A famously paranoid man, Gaddafi prioritized the advancement of his tribesmen, family, and those loyal to him. His sons, Kamis, led an army brigade, supposedly an avant-garde foil for a military coups. Gaddafi treated his enemies from cities such as Data, Burner, and Benghazi, most of them perceived with very little humanity. It was estimated that before the uprising, 1 in 3 Libyans was not a satisfactory beneficiary of the massive returns in the country's energy sector. If one was looking for a material to convict the idea that Gaddafi had to go, there was something. But logically, the state of affairs does not consist of permissions to the NATO intervention. Some say the severity of the matter in 2011 called for Western bombs, except the problem is that after World War II, Western wars of freedom outside of Europe have not been delivered as advertised. In the end of tradition, Obama's after Gaddafi plan was that there was no plan after Gaddafi. It might not be Obama's personal wish to leave the Libyan people headless and in a situation where human traffickers would have a field day, but his office gave him the right. In the months leading up to the coalition that went into Libya, the UK, France, and the US threw around the necessary rhetoric and actions synonymous with "we are very concerned." It was not until February 2011 that the French president, Nicolas Sarkozy, decided that Gaddafi must go. Between Sarkozy's declaration and August 2011, about 20 countries had contributed to the muscle, machines, and money to make the inevitable happen. There was not a single accord on how to not repeat the miseries of Iraq and Afghanistan that had happened just in the previous decade. That problem was Libya's. Urban even wrote in the BBC piece, there was good news, there was good reasons why Libya should be able to pull itself up in the coming months, not least the positive spirit and yearning for democracy. Libya was avoidable for Obama, a man enamored with history and symbolism of change. He could have negotiated a better alternative because at least that is what he promised to be all about. Leading the most powerful country in the world against a problematic dictator, Obama was well in the opposition to have sought a practical democratic experiment after the war. And he knew he was going to be held accountable to account on what happens after wars. Speaking to the Atlantic in 2016, Obama's former deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes noted this culture of accountability is accountability his former boss took. If you were to say, for instance, that we are going to rid Afghanistan of the Taliban and build prosperous democracy instead, the president is aware that someone 7 years later is going to hold you to that promise. What we saw with Libya was a sketchy, similar promise without using the words. In announcing America's participation in the coalition efforts, Obama said, we are protecting the Libyan people from Gaddafi's forces and putting in other measures to avoid further atrocities as part of the larger strategy to support the Libyan people. He was quick to add that the US's role was minor and praised more nations, not just the United States, bearing the responsibility and costs of upholding peace and security. The logic here was not dissimilar to the confession in 2016. The hesitation was in there, and so was the temptation to own up, a rather perfect blend of plausible deniability. This was the detachment Obama could afford. It is believable that he does regret what has become of Libya, but it is equally valid to say he was not thinking much about that when he signed the US up for the war. And that is one of the blots he has to live with. I get, that a lot of people think that, or a lot of people say that this is all Obama's fault. In reality, they have been gunning for Gaddafi for quite some time, long before Obama even got into office. I remember Reagan with his F-14 Tomcats were in the Mediterranean dogfighting with the Libyan Air Force. Yeah, that's right, Bullet Two Tone. They slaughtered a lot of black people. In fact, those were the first people they slaughtered, was the black people that Gaddafi gave reparations to Tuareg. And the Tuaregs were on the run. They still are on the run. D.E. Nicole, you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I don't know. I think they're trying to keep Libya in the place where it's at right now. As long as if somebody comes back in there that they can't control, and then it's going to fasten the removal of the French and their mindset from Africa, period. Which I'll be happy. So this general, I don't know, people look at, there's a guy who was fighting against the anointed government of the EU and the US. They're trying to keep him from taking Tripoli.
Yep.
And
After.
I don't know, Haftar. I don't know how, because one time he was a CIA asset, so I don't know what to think about him there. I have to wait till he take over and see what happens. If the Russians can capture his mind, if the Chinese can say, look, we're gonna deal with you if you can settle things down and build a peaceful country, then we will deal with you. If that happens, then things are gonna change.
Well, he also would be an agent of the Muslim Brotherhood because Turkey and the UAE and the Qatari seem to be backing him up a lot. They backed him up initially. We also saw that Turkey was the first one to use a laser cannon on one of the opposition's drones early this year. Actually, in the summertime, they shot it down with a laser cannon and they torched it. So we see who's behind Haftar. Haftar is loyal to those who can line his pockets.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Haftar is all over the place. When the Russians were leaving Syria, the Russian Navy was leaving Syria. They stopped in the Mediterranean, and Haftar was actually flown onto the aircraft carrier, and was talking with some of the generals from the Russian Navy. So.
It'd be good to see Libya become one country, peaceful again, and more prosperous. Because that's one under Gaddafi. Gaddafi was not always right, but it was leading the rest of Africa in the right direction.
Right.
Especially North Africa. And Gaddafi was doing what Venezuela was doing in the Caribbean. He was doing the same thing in West Africa. A lot of countries in West Africa were getting oil at a big discount from Gaddafi.
The only country in Africa that was really, kind of had a little bit of an edge on Libya was South Africa. That was it.
Or Nigeria would.
Well, Nigeria, definitely had a tremendous amount of wealth, but as far as infrastructure, the system that they had set up, schooling, education, healthcare, all that, they were a leader. They were a leader on that continent. Leader. Gaddafi had his shit together there. That's what people don't want to tell you. And we ruined it because we knew it was going to be a huge economic challenge to our hegemony there. That's why we did it.
Nigeria is being held in a corrupt state because it benefits the European and America. That's where the rich Nigerians take their money. So
well, Nigeria also, remember, they got that light sweet crude oil, some of the finest on the planet. That's a big part of the game. We can't count it out there. Light sweet crude, man. Light sweet crude. Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of people like to hold Obama accountable, but this is Hillary Clinton's war. She played the background in all of this stuff, and the new reports coming out this week is actually verifying all of this. These new cables that came out is verifying that Hillary Clinton was the mastermind behind all of this. Obama was just a figurehead. Did he have the executive order to stop it? Yeah, but it's surrounded by hawks.
If I was president, that shit wouldn't have gone down. Wouldn't have fucking happened. I said, I'm shutting you all down. I'm shutting you all down. That's how that would have been.
Then you have to make you see what they did to another man who took the same choice,
Kennedy?
Yeah.
Kennedy was a bad pig. Vietnam, you had tremendous hawks inside of the government at that stage who had, we were freshly out of the Second World War, really. Guys who had served during the Battle of the Bulge and all that shit. And you still had those guys in deep power. And they were looking at a red wave coming down. There was a lot that was happening. And they thought this guy was not moving right. And you had a very dangerous, fairly sick-minded mentality in office at that stage. You could see how something like that could have grown out of the post-Second World War era. So that's what Kennedy had to deal with. He was too young to manage that problem. And that was his issue. So the reactionary forces in the government got him, and they used other area, other means to get it. But I was in Russian stuff. I remember talking to some Russians about this, man, and they knew it went down. So I mean, that's basically what happened, man. Kennedy was a bit of a young boy up in there, around some real savages, and was what it was.
Yeah, he was young, but he was a political nerd too. Very, very much. His intelligence game on politics was top notch. He was surrounded by savages, like Nicole said, man. That couldn't wait to knock his Irish Catholic ass out.
Yeah, and there's a lot there. The Catholic issue and all. There's a lot of stuff that was involved. But really, the proximity to the Second World War, literally, 15, 16 years, 17 years before, guys had seen immense warfare, immense amount of doom. You had some very hawkish, very paranoid people in the government, and they did not trust this youngster, and they took his ass out. And you saw how things changed as soon as he went down to the moves we made right after that. So it's pretty obvious. Because he was pulling out of the bad pigs. He was pulling out of Vietnam. He was getting out of there.
Yep, the war machine just went back to chugging along the way it was going.
And Eisenhower warned him. If you listen to his military industrial complex speech, if you read that speech, you look at it, and he talked about, power being placed in the hands of unwarranted folks, unwarranted power in the hands of non-elected people. Yeah. And saying, y'all don't know what's going on. Even though I helped to create this shit, and it's gotten out of hand since I came out of here, so now I got to warn y'all, let y'all know. Y'all got to be aware of what's happening. He was warning the president. Listen, man, you got to understand what you're stepping into here, real quick. Got to know what you're stepping into. This is a beast that came together very quickly, and it's savage. You better understand what we're dealing with. And president, he was a young cat. 40. He's in his 40s, man. You're 40. You still kind of gin and juice running around. You still got gin and juice going on. You still kind of young. You still out there running around. He was out there, banging all kind of women and having fun. He just wasn't thinking about the people that were around him. And then when he started to realize what was up, it was a bit late.
Yep. Once he isolated, once he took the CIA off his pocket. You got to get the CIA in your pocket. You got to create some organization that has hands in the CIA, all the alphabets. You got to have people in all the alphabets that you're getting used other than what they tell you. And he didn't have that.
Well, I think he was an intelligent guy. He had a lot of very intelligent people around him. George Bundy, Paul Nitze. He let Robert McNamara run amok, in my view, which was ridiculous. A fucking Ford president, president of a fucking motor company coming out here handling this shit. That was a tremendous error. He put the wrong man in place, but he had very sharp guys around him, but I don't think they were well placed, and I don't think he listened to some of the stuff he should have listened to. And then he woke up, I mean, Khrushchev looked at him and said he ain't nothing. He ain't nothing but a kid, So a lot of guys thought he was a little bit in over his head. And I do think during that time he was. It's unfortunate, but he was.
Yeah. Read this next article from Reuters.com. U.S. Senate passes Hong Kong rights bill backing protesters, angers Beijing. The U.S. Senate unanimously passed legislation on Tuesday aimed at protecting human rights in Hong Kong, aimed at poorly written, aimed at crackdown on a pro-democracy protest movement, drawing condemnation from Beijing. Follow the voice vote. The Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act will go to the House of Representatives, which approved its own version last month. The two chambers will have to work out the differences before any legislation can be sent to President Donald Trump for his consideration. The people of Hong Kong see what's coming. They see the steady effort to erode the autonomy and their freedoms. Republican Senator Marco Rubio said at the start of the brief Senate debate, accusing Beijing of being behind the violence and repression in the Asian financial hub. The Senate passed a second bill, also unanimously, that would ban the export of certain crowd-controlled munitions to Hong Kong police forces. It bans the export of items such as tear gas, pepper spray, rubber bullets, and stun guns. Under the first Senate bill, the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo would have to certify at least once a year that Hong Kong retains enough autonomy to qualify for special U.S. trading consideration that bolsters its status as a world financial center. It also would provide for sanctions against officials responsible for human rights violations in Hong Kong. There was no immediate response from the White House, which has yet to say whether Trump would approve the Hong Kong Human Rights Bill. A U.S. official said recently that no decision had been made. The unanimous Senate vote could make a veto more difficult for the Republican president. The official, who spoke on condition of anonymity, said if the measure got to Trump's desk, there would probably be an intense debate between Trump's aides. It could undermine trade talks with China, those who believe it is time to take a stand against China on human rights and Hong Kong status. In Beijing on Wednesday, China condemned the passage of the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act and vowed stronger countermeasures to safeguard its sovereignty and security. The act neglects facts and truth, applies double standards, and blatantly interferes in Hong Kong affairs and China's other internal affairs. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zheng Shaoong said in a statement, "It is in serious violation of international law and basic norms governing international relations. China condemns and firmly opposes it. The United States must immediately stop interfering in Hong Kong affairs and China's other internal affairs, or the negative consequences will boomerang on itself," Zheng added. Pompeo on Monday said the United States was gravely concerned about Hong Kong's deepening unrest and violence, urging the city's government to tackle public concerns and China to honor the promises it made to maintain liberties after taking back the territory from the British rule in 1997. Pompeo addressed the issue again on Tuesday before leaving the United States for a NATO meeting in Brussels. I find this interesting that China promised to maintain the liberties after taking it back from the territory from British rule. So British colonialism is okay, but Chinese unification with Hong Kong is wrong. You have to maintain, the sovereignty of the country that they didn't have under British rule. Make that make sense to you?
I was listening to a guy who said he was one of the consultants to Chinese I forgot the department, but when they were setting up Belt and Road, and he said that for all intents purposes, Hong Kong as leadership role in is now finished. That nobody's now advising anybody to do business in Hong Kong. And from coming from his mouth, I would believe him, because he's one of the people that CIA talked to. His organization collects tons of information on China and kind of projects what's going to happen in China. And it's not just the information that he gathers secondhand, but comes directly from Chinese government sources. So China, I remember I said an article, you guys said, hey, China is just moving everything into Shenzhen and the other city across the river, and Hong Kong, and they have made the decision to let Hong Kong die. And sure enough, this guy just confirmed what I was thinking.
You have anything you want to add to this?
Oh, what's that, Mike? Go ahead.
I said, you have anything you want to add?
Oh no, I know. I totally agree with D on that. That's exactly how I see that going on. We've been seeing a lot of shake, rattle, and roll going on in Hong Kong, and that's getting ready to get shut down. I always knew that was going to happen. How was Hong Kong? How were they really going to fight? China. Just unrealistic, man. Just just that wasn't going to happen. So yeah, so I'm just totally agreeing with these. I had to say that's pretty much about it. What the article says. And next, unfortunately, next.
Yeah, I think the objective is to make it ungovernable.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Funny thing is, where are all these kids? The kids who are now creating a havoc, where are they going to go to work after, even if they get out of school?
well, they'll rely on
Mainland China.
Well, they'll rely on the UBI from the United States.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where the UBI is going. Okay. Yeah, it's totally ridiculous. I mean, they're starting to think, that Hong Kong is going to beat the big red giant sitting right there. Just not realistic. That just ain't gonna happen. Just not gonna happen. Is the United States? Are we going to commit troops there?
No. Well, don't forget that
Okay.
we have port calls to Hong Kong, but that's been denied the last couple of times. And there's been rumors that there's been weapons supplied to some of these what they consider to be anti-fascists or the protesters.
Okay, one more again. Are we going to supply troops there?
No, they're not going to supply troops to Hong Kong.
Okay. All right. Next.
They'll make it so ungovernable that it would be useless. It will be a useless territory to them, to China. So that's the main objective. The United States will never commit troops to something like that.
That's right. And to me, that's the only way if you're going to give a real fight to that and really try to keep that in the same state that it was before. I mean, I think you would have to have something kind of akin to that going on, and that's not going to happen. So unrealistic, wasn't ever going to happen, and we knew it. So to make it ungovernable, yeah, and then after a while, the inevitable is the inevitable. DE, what do you think the inevitable is over there? What's the inevitable, DE?
China is going to wait them out, and then it's going to take over Hong Kong probably before the contract was out that they signed with the British.
Yeah, that's about to show along of that.
It doesn't make sense. I mean, this is one of the tools that they're using to kind of try to slow down China, and it's not going to happen.
All right, let me get to this next article from the South China Morning Post. BRICS voice loud and clear on free trade. Pledges by 5 nations at Brazil summit are not only good for their economies, but also good for globalization and free in the face of U.S. protectionism. Oh, this is going to be long. Globalization may have had its critics, but it remains important to economic growth. The rise of protectionism driven by the United States has created headwinds, but it has also created momentum for regional multilateral deals to sustain global growth. China, the world's second largest economy and champion of multilateralism, has been at the forefront of these alliances. With its roles in, for example, in the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, a proposed free trade area between 15 nations and BRICS, a huge internal trade group that also includes Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa. While a small number of issues remain to be settled before the RCEP is signed, hopefully early next year, the BRICS nations have just concluded that their 11th summit in Brazil, at which they affirm their commitment to their partnership on new industrial revolution. This is a deal to boost trade and investment among themselves, launched at the 10th summit in South Africa last year. Renewed pledges to develop this strategy are not only good for their own economies, but consistent with their support from the multilateral trade regime. At the closing ceremony of last week's summit in Brasilia, also attended by the leaders of the other BRICS members, President Xi Jinping said protectionism and bullying were harming international trade and investment. He said the BRICS nations should also push a new round of technological and industrial revolution in the face of a new global changes. Xi and other Chinese leaders keep reminding the international community that an outward-looking China offers opportunities for the rest of the world. China, given that China in the world's second biggest economy, India the sixth, Brazil the 8th, Russia the 11th, and South Africa the 33rd, BRICS is an ideal platform to exploit the potential. With developing nations key to global growth, but lacking a voice in old established trade and economic institutions that reflects this reality, forums that enable them to work together can only help to safeguard the multilateral trade system. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to add to that. Let me just get to these next two, then we can close out. All right, this one's from RT.com, 10 years of BRICS, which what keeps five headstrong powers together in times of global disunion. For the past 10 years, BRICS have navigated dramatic turns in global politics and the economy to emerge as an association of countries that is likely to play a key role in a new world order. As I'm writing this, the BRICS summit is going to an end in Brazil. The particular summit is significant not only because the association marks the 10th anniversary, this time the most noteworthy aspect is the location. Brazil is headed by Jair Bolsonaro, a man considered staunchly pro-American and someone who passionately admires and even imitates Donald Trump. Bolsonaro's sweeping victory in the presidential election last fall led to some speculate whether BRICS could lose its first letter. Besides openly looking up to the US, the ex-army captain made a number of hostile remarks regarding China during his campaign, quite in the spirit of the American prototype. One of his complaints was that Beijing had been economically enslaving Brazil and Latin America in general. Another of his claims was that doing business with China is unprofitable.
This guy's a moron, bro. I'm sorry to cut you. This guy's a freaking moron, bro. He's a moron. Mm-hmm. This guy is a total fucking moron.
BRICS,
all right. Anyway, go ahead.
BRICS emerged in a completely different era. So questions about its viability now are not ungrounded. However, there are no reasons to abandon the format. In today's world, it is false to presume that all players must make some ultimate choice, join some block, and obediently follow this or that path. This kind of mindset belongs to the 20th century. Even if we view current events as a new edition of a Cold War, as many say, its structure and substance are different. The concept of BRICS was coined as an investment PR move by Goldman Sachs, but it has since turned into a political entity regardless of what the authors originally had in mind. BRICS was described as a number of different things, including an anti-hegemonic, anti-American group, a prototype of the multi-world order, and so on. In reality, it was never the case in any explicit way. None of the BRICS countries were ever interested in challenging the US. Russia came closer than others during the times of tension. Even Moscow was cautious. This association, rather amorphous, as we have to admit, has always had one common denominator that has been very significant. And all five states were fully sovereign. They were capable of making their own decisions. You can do it if you do not join any binding alliances. Have a clear understanding of your interests regionally and globally, and rely on self-sufficient economic potential that enables you to implement the decisions you've made. Each letter of the acronym has significant economic and political clout. Each country has their fair share of domestic and external issues, but they do share the above mentioned properties. Essentially, there are a few economies in the world that can afford it, including the US, European countries, and Japan, for instance. Despite all the economic power, cannot boast full sovereignty as members of binding alliances. Until recently, the association was looked upon as a copy of the non-alignment movement. On one hand, you have a powerful Western political bloc, the Euro and Atlantic world, with some countries from other regions clinging to it. And on the other, you have these independent players. These days, independence, the need to take sovereign decisions and work with multiple partners, flexibility, and finally putting together yourself first is the talk of the town. It now features high on the agenda in the US, the heart of the global system, and all the way to its allies in Europe and Asia. While the allies have been getting increasingly wary of their US dependence, they are reluctant to cut it for various reasons. As it turns out, the non-affiliation of the BRICS states have with any of the powerhouses, and the group's free and informal nature aren't necessarily a flaw, rather an advantage. No binding commitments condition coordination only in common grounds for talks. Also, you get a sense that you belong to a club of the most influential non-Western powers and decision-making centers, one way or another. These decisions are unlikely to be coordinated, but they can be if needed. The times of hard block discipline are clearly over. I'm not going to read this whole thing because it kind of just rehashes what we already know. That is, regardless of what Bolsonaro has to say, the rest of the members are not going to watch Brazil, try to dissolve the whole entire format.
Oh, Mike, what are you saying there?
That Bolsonaro, regardless of what Bolsonaro thinks, he is not going to dissolve the BRICS format. They're not going to let him do that.
Well, I keep telling you guys, don't hear this guy. This guy was on the payroll of the CIA, man. This is a former CIA operative, dude. People don't even understand that. This guy's been put there. He's been put there for a reason. There's a reason why this Branquelo is there. All right, and and the reasons are not good, and they're not within the interest of most of the Brazilian people. And he's only representing a really small amount, a really small population of who's going on. They killed a Brazilian councilman out of the favelas early this year. The murderer was right next door, came right into this man's gated community and went right to one of his people right next door to his house, where the killers and him hung out and left from. I mean, these guys. These dudes are effed up, man. These guys are effed up. So the interest of him is to roll with a certain business complex, political complex that exists between the United States and Brazil, and he's a part of that. That's why they couped Dilma. They did a bloodless coup on her and put Lula in jail. All right, who's going to be coming out, who is definitely going to ride to a tremendous victory at the end of this Joker's term if they don't blow his head off. Okay, so that's what's going on. The economy, people are getting poorer. The dollar is super strong down there. I mean, if you're American, you go down there right now, it's 4.16. $4 and a biscuit. If you want to go down there, and hang out, you definitely are going to have, your dollar's going to go far. Not doing a lot, not doing that great for the Brazilian folks. So he's looking out for a certain class. This guy is effed up. I don't like him. Many others don't. They think, well, he's going to come down on crime and so forth. He's one of the creators of crime down there. So I have no love for this guy. I think he is the worst. I wish I could vote down there myself, but but I can't. But that's where we are. This guy is the worst, and he needs to go. That's all I'm gonna really say about that. About this at this stage, he needs to be voted out of office or found to be corrupt and jailed as well, because this guy is a straight up gangster. That's what this guy is, a gangster.
I totally, I mean, 100% agree with you, because things have gone downhill from the time he came into office. And
see, I'm talking on the ground every day.
Right.
Every day.
I haven't seen the dollar. I haven't seen the real in such poor condition since when Lula came into office. Because when Lula came into office, I think it was about like 450, or close to five reals to one.
No. When Lula came into office, the real was it was about 370 or so. And then it's gone, and then it went down to it was almost 1-to-1. It came close. Okay, yep. He brought a lot of people out of poverty down there.
Poverty,
right? Yes. Had health care, the favelas. You even had the
open up the colleges.
Exactly correct. The bulky police forces.
Black kids, a lot of black people started sending their kids to college. He paid the parents, you know what? We're going to give you money every month so you can send your kids to school. You don't have to go out in the street thing and let your kids run around the favela. Send your kids to school. Yep.
I mean, you have that. You had health care. You had certain things that were going on that they didn't have. Even the police forces, the most horrific and rapacious, BOPI, batalhões, operações, polícia especial, that's what that sounds for. But it was a special police force designed specifically to go into the favelas and tear folks out the frame. Even they had to come in underneath Lula and change their platform to a more not only conciliatory, but work with the community now, instead of coming in here like an occupying murderous bloodthirsty force designed by the state to come there to keep people of color and poor people down. So we saw some changes there. There were a lot of things that were starting to go on that people really liked. All the stuff is being being reversed now. So a lot of unrest. You don't see it on the news, but if you ever pull up El Global and you pull them up, El Global, you ever pull them up on online and you put your translator in there, you'll start to see all the unrest. There's stuff going on every day there. People, nobody told you about how they were standing outside of Lula's jail for literally almost 2 years, every day protesting his imprisonment. And right now, and they threw him out with no pension. He's a man who was president of the country, elected twice, and he's got no pension. How is that? So he got no pension. So you got people literally covering him. So, I mean, these dudes, they're trying to go back to, so what I think these guys are going to try to do is bring this thing back to a military junta, again, like they had in the 80s. Yep. On the Cadeno and these guys. But that's what I think they're going to try to do. I don't know if that's going to be so successful. I don't know, because there are too many folks who are kind of seeing the bullshit right now, and you even have some folks who are of the middle classes and so forth who are looking at this like, this is real shaky. So this is going to be interesting to see how this comes down. But you're right, Mike. As far as them trying to shake up the BRICS and knock this back, I think they're gonna have a hard time with that. They're gonna have a hard time. And I know America, this is our territorial and imperative. This is underneath our Monroe Doctrine. But had our man saying, the Godfather Tempe Combi, times are changing. Things are starting to change. And you got some other big players in town. And the Chinese are there. Are they rapacious? Are they throwing at the frame like this Joker is saying? No. They know what that means. So that's why certain things are are going to have to change. But I'm very, very, very much upset about what I see going on in Brazil. I was very upset about it from the time of the Olympics to what's going on now. So I'm very disturbed by a lot of stuff. Hopefully they're able to get this right. My ex-fiance is down. I talk to her all the time. I know what's going on. It's not good.
All right, let me get to this last article. This one is RT.com. Phasing out the dollar, BRICS countries setting up own payment network to cut dependence on Western financial systems. In the past 5 years, Russia has almost halved its foreign trade payments in U.S. currency from 92 to 50%, said the CEO of Russian Direct Investment Fund, RDIF, and member of the BRICS Business Council, Kirill Dmitriev. Talking to RT on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Brazil, Dmitriev said that payments in ruble increased from 3 to 14% over the period. The 5 major emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are currently developing a new joint payment system. An efficient BRICS payment system can encourage payments in national currencies and ensure sustainable payments and investments among our countries, which make up over 20% of the global inflow of foreign direct investment. He explained that developing the national segments of payment systems and their sustainable integration are the key drivers of the economic partnership among the BRICS countries, given the increasing non-market risk of the global payment infrastructure. The potential use of a single cryptocurrency for payments among BRICS member countries is also expected to be discussed during the forum. Such payments will be conducted via the BRICS payment system, Dmitriev said, adding the joint funds established with RDIF's assistance for investments made in national currencies and technology development can serve as the foundation for that. RDIF in blockchain and cryptocurrencies as a backstop to the SWIFT system. States to go in and garnish people's people's bank accounts, as well as put sanctions on people. Those days are coming to an end. Give it about 10 to 15 years and it'll be game over.
Agreed.
Yep, even the EU is well, they've been working on theirs for the longest time, but they have said, you know what, we're gonna have to ease away from the dollar too. So the only place you're gonna have the dollar is like if the US can force like Mexico and Colombia and all these other nations that, you know what, you can't trade anything except the dollar.
Well, there's always been some talk and some speculation that United States are going to try to go literally with the United States down to Mexico. They may even try it in South America. Who knows? The Ameridollar. I don't know if you guys have heard of that.
Yeah, I heard about that. The Amero, that was they had that plan long
ago. But
yep.
but there's more. They're ginning that talk up again to try to get the dollar, get this fiat currency totally unified throughout, the Americas. So, so they're trying to, lock up this hemisphere with $1, with a certain, with one currency, which is, I think that'll be disastrous. But that's the plan. And I think that might become more of a reality as time goes on, especially what we're going to be seeing in the East.
Yeah.
What do you think, Mike?
No, everything is moving east. So
yep.
In terms of the market, so because of that, it makes sense that they would have to set up a new payment system and a whole new architecture to deal with the emerging economies and emerging tech that's going along with it. The U.S. doesn't have any sort of response to that. They're still debating whether or not they should legalize marijuana or cannabis, whatever you want to call it. So they're so far behind all of this and caught with their pants down while sitting on a can. Somebody should just run by and just take away all the TP from them and let them stew in their own juices for the most part. I myself do not foresee myself retiring here. I think by 50 I am gone.
Agreed. I totally have my whole retirement plan set for you know where, and I ain't gonna be up in this piece if I can help it.
Yeah. So I see myself being out of here. I looked at the U.S. dollar to the Beijing currency, Beijing dollar, and you can actually live pretty good down there on $100,000.
What? What? 100 grand? Oh, bro.
I don't know if you can live off 100 grand here in the U.S. and comfortably in the way that you would in some other country. What would have cost, $2,000 for an apartment in New York, you getting that at $150 to $250 in Barbados for the same square footage. So,
man, you over there in Barbados, you're gonna have drivers, valets, servants, and come on, bro. You're gonna be cold banging. If you're in Africa, you're gonna be living crazy. If you're down in Brazil and South America in these spots, you're gonna be living crazy with live-in help and everything else like that. Somebody to polish every inch of your room, of your place, and even polish you up as well. So I mean, it's come on, man. The game here is going to become much less valuable because people are going to see it's just, you're working too hard. I see people here just work. It's kind of not worth it. It's kind of getting to be not worth it. I mean, even though we have a lot of land here and there's a lot of stuff here, but still, it's just way too expensive. And and your kids can't even go to school properly. They can't even get properly educated here without going into some ill debt, hundreds of grand. It's crazy. It's crazy. This is not making sense.
You can go to school in the Caribbean. I mean, great schools, because the people who go to school in the Caribbean, then they come here and get great jobs. So you can go to school in the Caribbean, train for anything that you got your money. You can be a doctor down there, lawyer. I mean, the schools are there. In South America, you do the same thing.
You can get
10% of what it costs him.
You can get a medical degree in Brazil for less than 30 grand. Did you hear that? Less than 30 grand, man. Did you hear that? For it, that's what you can do down there. Medical degree, MD, and you're one of the higher paid people in that society. For that, you're talking about damn near 100 times more here.
Yeah. Next year, South Africa assumes position of the African Union, and it's going to change. There's going to be some differences going into play. We should see something happening on the continent. April 2020 happens in terms of the geopolitical landscape and the vibe that's going to come out of all of this. All right, thank you all for joining us. If you have not hit the like button, please hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Brain Trust. There'll be a docket in the description beneath the video after this live stream is over. If you have commentary, make sure you post your comments at the end of the video. Shalom, everyone.
Shalom.